I never thought that, at the age of 62, my life could take a different turn. My days passed by like a quiet stream, peaceful yet monotonous. In the mornings, I tended to my garden, the only source of pride I had in this little house. In the afternoons, I brewed a cup of tea, sat on the rocking chair on my porch, and watched the sunset paint the sky over the town of Durham in shades of red. That day was a fresh May afternoon, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of lavender I had just pruned. I was admiring my flower beds when an unfamiliar sound came from the house across the street. The rhythmic pounding of a hammer was mixed with occasional muttered words of frustration. I looked up, curious. On the roof was a young man, fumbling with a loose wooden plank. He looked awkward, the hammer nearly slipping from his hand every time he reached for something. Even from a distance, I could clearly see his tall, sturdy figure and dark hair falling untidily under the sunlight. He seemed unaccustomed to the task, yet his determination made me smile. For some reason, a thought crossed my mind: this stranger surely needs some help. That evening, I went into the kitchen and made an apple pie. It was an old recipe I used to bake for my late husband, the kind of pie that could bring a smile to his face no matter how tough the day had been. When the pie turned golden brown and filled the kitchen with its warm aroma, I placed it on a white porcelain plate and wondered if I was being too forward. But then I thought, surely no one could object to a little apple pie. I walked over to the house across the street. The front door was slightly ajar, and I knocked gently. He appeared, looking even more flustered than he had been on the roof. "Hello," I smiled, holding out the plate. "I'm Rose. I live across the street. I noticed you just moved in, so I thought I'd bring over a little something to welcome you." For a moment, he looked surprised, and then a slow smile spread across his face. "Oh, thank you. I'm Alex." To be honest, I'm not used to such a warm welcome. I chatted with Alex for a while. He shared that he had just moved from New York, leaving behind the chaos and pressures of work in search of a quieter place. He was a freelance writer, trying to finish his first novel. "Well, you've certainly come to the right place," I said with a soft laugh. Durham doesn't lack peace. Sometimes, though, it can be a little lonely. Alex looked at me as if he were pondering something, but he didn't say anything more. That night, back in my house, I stood by the window and looked over at the house across the street. The warm glow of a yellow light spilled out from his window, illuminating his silhouette as he worked at his desk. I wasn't sure why, but I felt a quiet warmth blooming inside me, a strange rhythm in my heart that I thought I had forgotten long ago. Could this be the beginning of something new? I wondered, my eyes slowly closing as I drifted into a dream-filled sleep. In the days that followed, I began seeing Alex more often. Sometimes it was on the small path leading to the market, other times, it was when he walked past my garden. His smile had become something I looked forward to each day, like a small but essential part of my routine. We often stopped to chat, not about anything profound, just snippets of conversation about the weather, the blooming flowers, or the book he was reading. Somehow, those brief exchanges felt like tiny sparks, warming the quiet rhythm of my life. One morning, I stood outside my favorite bakery, waiting in line for a fresh loaf of bread as usual. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me, followed by a familiar voice. "Rose, are you free this morning?" I turned around. Alex was standing there, holding a cup of coffee, steam rising and forming a faint mist in front of his face. His smile was radiant, as if it carried the sunlight on that pale morning. "Yes, I'm free," I replied, though I had no idea what he had in mind. "I just heard that the community center is hosting a dance class next week," Alex said, his voice brimming with excitement. "The waltz, you know. I thought you might like it. It's not hard to learn, and it's a lot of fun. Would you like to give it a try?" I hesitated, the surprise evident on my face. Dancing? When was the last time I had stepped onto a dance floor? I searched my memory, and a faint image of my late husband came to mind. I remembered those evenings when we danced under the soft glow of lights, his hand guiding me through every beat of the music. Alex looked at me, waiting, his eyes lit with a boyish anticipation. You wouldn't mind if I dragged you to a dance class, would you? I let out a small laugh, feeling a bit self-conscious. Dancing? I'm not sure I even remember how to turn anymore. Alex shrugged, laughing heartily. That's okay. Just let me lead. I promise I won't let you fall. His words eased my nerves, melting away my hesitation. I wasn't sure why I agreed. Perhaps it was the sincerity in his eyes, or perhaps I too needed a break from the monotony of my routine. Great! See you next week, Alex said, raising his coffee cup in a cheerful farewell. I stood there, watching him walk away, a strange excitement bubbling in my chest. Maybe it was the enthusiasm in his eyes, or maybe I needed a little change myself. That evening, I stood in front of the mirror for a long time before heading out. The light blue dress I chose was simple, but I thought it hugged my figure just enough to be graceful without being ostentatious. The soft hallway light highlighted the fabric's smooth texture, and I smiled at my reflection, a smile tinged with nervousness. When I walked into the community center, the golden lights illuminated the room brilliantly. Gentle music floated in the air, inviting everyone to join in. The spacious hall, with its polished wooden floor, reflected the glow of the chandeliers above. Everywhere I looked, there were eager faces, tentative steps, and bursts of laughter from newcomers testing their moves. I moved through the crowd, feeling slightly out of place, wondering if I was making a fool of myself. But then I saw Alex. He walked toward me, his smile lighting up his face. His white shirt was simple but accentuated his broad shoulders and strong build. The fitted jeans he wore gave him a youthful, energetic look, a striking contrast to me. Rose, are you ready? He asked, his warm voice reassuring me, as if to say I had nothing to fear. I smiled, though my palms were slightly damp. I'm not sure I even remember how to move. Alex tilted his head, his gaze full of encouragement. That's okay, he said, holding out his hand. Just let me lead. I placed my hand on his shoulder, feeling the warmth of his body through the fabric of his shirt. His hand gently but firmly held mine, as if to reassure me that everything would be fine. The first step was clumsy. I felt like a child learning to walk, my left foot stepping when it should have been my right. But Alex didn't show the slightest hint of frustration. He smiled, a soft smile that instantly put me at ease. It's okay, Rose. Let's try again, he said in his steady, soothing voice. Alex's steps guided me, steady and sure, like a drumbeat echoing from his heart. I tried my best to keep up, but when I stumbled, Alex just chuckled softly, his hand lightly adjusting my footing. You're doing great, he said, his voice encouraging. I smiled, feeling the awkwardness melt away. The golden lights, the soft music, and the warmth of Alex's hand made me forget my fears. For the first time in a long while, I felt not just alive but truly living. As we continued to move, I realized I was beginning to find the rhythm. When Alex led me into a spin, my dress twirled lightly in the air, like a flower caught in the breeze. See? Alex whispered, his eyes shining with joy. You've got this. I looked at him, my heart racing. Thank you, I said softly, but with deep sincerity. That evening, the room remained aglow with light, and the music played on, but I no longer heard any of it. All I felt was Alex, his steps, his presence, and the miraculous feeling of revival spreading through me. After a few lessons, everything began to feel more natural. I started to sense the rhythm of each piece of music, the movement of every step, and the way Alex guided me, steady yet gentle. His hands were always in the right place, firm enough to keep me balanced, but light enough to let me feel free, like a leaf gliding effortlessly across the surface of water. When Alex spun me around, the golden lights on the ceiling seemed to blur, blending with the soft waltz music that filled the room. For the first time, I stopped noticing the eyes of those around me. There was no awkwardness, no feeling of being out of place amidst the crowd. All that remained was the music, the dim glow of light, and Alex's hands, the only thing grounding me in that moment. You know, Alex said, his voice so close I could feel his breath, you look radiant when you smile. I hesitated for a moment, nearly losing step. My cheeks burned as though his compliment had awakened something within me, a part of myself I thought had long been dormant. Am I smiling? I asked, trying to mask my flustered reaction. Alex smiled, his gaze piercing through the walls I had built around myself. Yes. A real smile, not out of politeness, but because you're enjoying yourself. It's beautiful. I felt my heart beat faster, like the rhythm of a drum merging with the music. That simple compliment made me feel like I was young again, when someone's words or gaze could make me feel special. The lesson ended, and people began to leave, their footsteps and quiet laughter gradually fading. The room was almost empty now, save for Alex and me, standing by the old record player. It was still playing the last notes of the evening's music, the sound soft but enchanting. How do you feel? Alex asked, his eyes filled with anticipation. I took a deep breath before answering, my lips curling into a genuine smile. I think. I had forgotten how alive dancing can make someone feel. Alex laughed, his voice echoing softly, mingling with the fading music. That's why I wanted you to come. Sometimes, we need to do something that reminds us, we're still alive, still here. I looked at him, saying nothing, only nodding. But deep down, I felt his words touch the hidden corners of my soul, those parts of me that still longed to feel alive, to experience, to love again. That night, as I returned home, I couldn't stop thinking about the evening. About the confident steps Alex had helped me rediscover, about his hands guiding me so skillfully, and about the freedom and lightness I hadn't felt in so long. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, but my mind was still on the dance floor, beneath the golden lights and the soft, lingering music. It's been so long since I felt this way, I thought, as I closed my eyes, letting the smile that remained on my lips carry me into a dream-filled sleep. I couldn't recall the last time I had an evening as special as this one. When the knock on my door echoed through the house and I opened it, Alex stood there, holding a bottle of red wine and smiling as brightly as morning sunshine. We should celebrate your first waltz, he said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I chuckled and stepped aside to let him in. Celebrate? I don't think I'm good enough to deserve that. You're better than you think, Alex replied with such conviction that I couldn't help but believe him. Our dinner was simple but satisfying, crusty bread, a few slices of soft cheese, and some fresh fruit I'd picked from the garden. We sat across from each other in my small kitchen, the warm light from the ceiling casting a soft glow over everything. The atmosphere between us felt different, not the awkwardness of two people who'd just met, but the comfort of familiarity, as if we'd known each other for years. Alex shared small anecdotes from his writing work, sprinkling in jokes that made me laugh. But what I loved most was the way he listened. Whenever I spoke, he gave me his full attention, his gaze steady, never interrupting or rushing me. It made me feel, at least for the moment, truly understood. As the light inside the house began to dim, Alex suggested we move to the porch. The night breeze carried the faint scent of lavender from the garden, and the nearly empty bottle of wine glimmered under the starlight, its deep red hue catching the glow. I sat on the wooden bench while Alex leaned against the railing, his eyes fixed on the star-filled sky. The soft chirping of crickets provided a gentle background melody to our conversation. Have you ever thought about what you would do differently if you could relive your youth? Alex asked suddenly, his voice quiet yet filling the stillness around us. I laughed, though it was tinged with introspection. His question made me pause, like a soft breeze stirring the still waters of my mind. Of course, I replied, my eyes lingering on the twinkling stars above. But Alex, youth doesn't come back, and I don't want to waste my time dwelling on regrets. Now, I just want to live in a way that feels true to what I feel. I turned to look at him and found his gentle gaze meeting mine. There was no judgment or curiosity in his eyes, only quiet understanding. I think you're doing a wonderful job of that, he said warmly. Every time I see you in your garden, I feel this strange sense of peace. Maybe it's because you live so authentically. And that, it's beautiful. I stayed silent, letting his words sink in. There was a strange comfort in them, not the kind that comes from grand gestures, but the quiet reassurance of being seen, acknowledged, and understood. I took a deep breath, letting the cool night air wrap around me. In that moment, I realized that the past wasn't as important as how we chose to live in the present. Alex sat down beside me, the wine bottle now holding only its final drops. We didn't say much after that, simply gazing at the stars. But the silence between us wasn't heavy, it was as gentle and comforting as a soft blanket on a cool night. That night, I no longer felt alone. Beneath the vast expanse of stars, I understood that sometimes, connection with another person isn't born from grand gestures, but from small, genuine moments like this. I didn't know how long we sat there. The sky was dark and endless, glittering with stars, but I felt nothing except the pounding of my heart. It no longer seemed to belong to me, its rhythm strange, part anticipation, part unease. Alex sat across from me, his eyes distant as though he was running from something. He stayed silent for a long time, and that silence stretched like a taut string, pulling my thoughts toward the edge of some unknown precipice. "Rose," he said at last, his voice hesitant, as though even he wasn't sure if he should continue. I frowned slightly, my heart tightening, but I kept my voice calm. "What is it, Alex?" He took a deep breath before turning to face me. In his eyes, I saw something I wasn't ready to confront, both tender and intense, like a flame about to ignite but held back. I think I've fallen in love with you." His words fell into the quiet between us like a stone dropped into still water, rippling outward. I froze, my hands resting on my knees, trembling slightly. "Alex, are you joking?" I asked, laughing lightly, though my voice betrayed me. It quivered, and I knew the smile on my face was nothing but a fragile facade. "No," Alex replied, his gaze unwavering. It wasn't the look of someone teasing. It was so sincere that it hurt. "I know it's unconventional. There's an age gap, and you probably think I'm not serious. But I truly feel this way. You make me feel alive again, like everything has meaning." I felt like I was being swept away by his words. My heart couldn't deny that his confession awakened something long dormant within me. I wasn't young anymore, but I couldn't deny that Alex made me feel something I thought I'd lost forever. But my rational mind pulled me back, like a strong hand gripping me before I could drift too far. "Alex, I hesitated, searching for the right words to protect both him and myself. "We're too different. You're young. You have your whole future ahead of you." He looked at me, his lips curving into a sad smile, though his gaze remained as kind as ever. "I don't need an answer now, Rose. I just wanted you to know how I feel." I looked at him, torn. Part of me wanted to shut this down immediately, to end it before it could begin. But another part longed to hold on to this moment, the moment I felt loved and cared for in a way I hadn't in so long. I didn't respond, only nodded slightly, as if to say I understood his words, but wasn't ready. Alex said nothing more. He leaned back in his seat, his eyes returning to the glittering stars above. The silence between us now was no longer awkward but filled with meaning. Inside me, conflicting emotions swirled relentlessly. I knew that tonight, when I went to bed, I wouldn't be able to forget Alex's eyes or the words he'd spoken. They would linger, like a small flame burning quietly, impossible to extinguish or ignore. After his confession, Alex and I sat silently. The breeze carried the soft scent of lavender from the garden, and I didn't know what to say. I couldn't deny that Alex had changed my life, but the fear of our age gap and societal judgment held me back. When Alex finally left, I stood on the porch, watching his figure disappear into the night. My heart was tangled in emotions, desire, fear, and uncertainty. I looked up at the sky. The stars continued to twinkle peacefully, as if nothing had changed. But for me, everything had. A flame had been lit inside me, and I wasn't sure if I had the courage to let it burn. Could I overcome my own barriers? The question lingered as I drifted to sleep, accompanied by the image of Alex's smile, his warm and genuine gaze. After that evening under the starry sky, nothing was the same. I couldn't quite put my finger on what had changed, but Alex seemed different. He no longer appeared at my door with a bottle of wine and his radiant smile. The long conversations we used to share gradually faded away. When we happened to cross paths on the street, he still greeted me, but his smile no longer felt genuine. It was strained, as if he were trying to hold on to something he wasn't certain of himself. I continued attending dance class every Tuesday evening, but Alex, who had once guided me through my first steps, now kept his distance. He no longer sought me out to twirl across the wooden floor. Each time our eyes met by chance, he would quickly look away, leaving me standing there with an indescribable emptiness. I noticed his avoidance, but I didn't know what to do about it. Strangely enough, I realized I was also trying to avoid him. I was scared. Scared that if we crossed the boundary of our fragile peace, everything would fall apart. Scared that if I let myself be swept away by these emotions, the cost would be a deeper pain than anything I'd ever experienced. One late afternoon, the golden light of the setting sun filtered through the trees, casting a soft glow over my garden. I stood there, pruning freshly bloomed roses. The deep red petals fell to the ground like drops of blood, but I wasn't really paying attention to what I was doing. Alex's image filled my mind, vivid as though he were standing right in front of me. Every word he had spoken, every glance, every moment we'd shared, it all swirled in my head, trapping me in a vortex of emotions I couldn't escape. I looked over at the house across the street. The windows were shut, with no light or sound coming from within. An eerie silence hung between us, like an invisible wall dividing two worlds. I tightened my grip on the pruning shears, the cold metal pressing into my palm. A single question echoed in my mind. Should I do something, or should I let it all fade away like this? But no answer came. I stood there in the middle of my blooming garden, feeling utterly hollow, as if I too had become a part of the silence. Rain began to fall just as I stepped back into my house, heavy drops pounding down as though trying to wash everything away. The rhythmic sound of the rain mirrored my own heartbeat, irregular, frantic, and tumultuous. I stood on the porch, clutching a bag of groceries to my chest, feeling as though the weight of my emotions was heavier than the rain itself. My eyes drifted toward Alex's house again. The windows remained closed, just as he had seemingly closed off every connection between us in recent days. An impulsive thought struck me, making me straighten up. I can't let things end like this. Not in silence. I set the bag down, threw on a light jacket, and grabbed an umbrella. Without another thought, I stepped into the rain, each cold drop stinging my skin as it seeped through my hair and clothes. When I knocked on Alex's door, my heart was racing, as though I were gambling with everything I had. The door opened, and there he stood, his eyes widening in surprise as he saw me, soaked, despite the umbrella, breathless from running through the downpour. "Rose, what are you doing here?" Alex asked, his voice a mix of worry and confusion. "Alex, we need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though the emotions surging within made it tremble. He hesitated for a moment before stepping aside to let me in. The warmth of his home contrasted sharply with the tension that hung between us. My wet coat clung heavily to my body, a physical reflection of the weight I felt inside. "Why have you been avoiding me?" I asked, looking directly at him, trying to keep my composure despite the frustration and confusion in my voice. Alex sighed, his gaze drifting away as though searching for an escape from the conversation I had forced upon him. He turned toward his cluttered desk, lightly running his fingers over the scattered books on it. "You know why, Rose," he said softly, his voice heavy with resignation. "I told you how I felt, but I don't think it's right." His words hit me like a cold gust of wind. But instead of retreating, I stepped closer, closing the space between us. "Right or not, that's not the point," I said, my hands clenched as I tried to summon all the courage I had. "I just want to know why you chose to pull away instead of facing it." Alex turned to face me, his eyes suddenly alive with a whirlwind of emotions, pain, regret, and a helplessness that cut through me. "Because I'm scared, Rose," he admitted, his voice trembling. "Scared that I'm not mature enough to overcome the judgment we'd face. Scared that I'd hurt you if I couldn't follow through with this. Scared that everything we've built would only lead to an ending neither of us wants." He paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "I thought keeping my distance was the best way. I didn't want to be the cause of your pain." I stared at him, my heart breaking at his words. His honesty and fear were palpable, leaving no room for anger but making acceptance equally difficult. "Alex," I said, my voice softer now but still resolute. "You think that distancing yourself will make things better, but have you considered that it's only hurting us more? I don't need guarantees. I just need to know that you're brave enough to face what you feel." He fell silent, his eyes locking with mine as though searching for answers in them. I didn't know if he found what he was looking for, but I knew I had done everything I could to hold on to what we had. The rain continued to pour outside, its rhythm blending with the silence between us, creating a bittersweet melody for the moment. "Alex," I finally said, my voice trembling. "You don't have to decide everything now. We can take this one step at a time. Life's too short to let fear hold us back." He looked at me, his eyes reflecting the conflict within him. I waited, hoping for a glimmer of change in his resolve. But then he lowered his head, as though battling the words he needed to say. "Rose," he began, his voice heavy with emotion. "I want to believe that it's possible. I want to think I have the courage to face this. But I'm not sure I can. I don't want to hurt you. Maybe I need to leave, take some time to figure myself out." His words hit me like a wave, leaving me adrift. My heart shattered as each word etched itself into my memory, leaving scars I knew would take time to heal. Yet, deep down, I knew he wasn't lying. I took a deep breath, forcing back tears. "Then go," I said, my voice fragile but firm. "But don't forget that, wherever you are, you've made my life so much brighter." Alex stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder, a touch both comforting and heartbreaking. "Thank you, Rose," he said softly. "You're an incredible woman, and I'm so grateful to have met you." His words felt like a final goodbye, laden with sincerity but leaving behind an ache I couldn't shake. As the rain continued to fall outside, I turned and walked away from his house. The cold drops mixed with the tears streaming down my face, indistinguishable from one another. Back home, everything felt too quiet, the silence pressing down on me like a heavy weight. I sat by the window, staring through the fogged glass. Alex's house felt farther away than ever, with only the faint glow of his desk lamp visible. I knew this was the end. A part of me wanted to hold on, but I also understood that I couldn't force someone to stay if they weren't ready. That night, I lay in bed, listening to the rain's steady rhythm. Memories of Alex flooded my mind, but this time, they didn't cut as deeply. Instead, they left behind a bittersweet warmth, like a wound slowly healing. I knew I had to learn to let go and take each step forward, even if Alex wasn't by my side anymore. That night, I sat silently by the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. The steady rhythm of the raindrops felt like a melancholy melody rising from the depths of my soul. Outside, darkness enveloped the neighborhood, with only the dim streetlights piercing through the hazy curtain of rain. Alex's image lingered in my mind, so vivid I could almost feel the warmth of his smile, the tenderness in his eyes whenever he looked at me, and the pain in his voice as he struggled to say goodbye. But I didn't cry. Perhaps I had shed enough tears in my lifetime to know they couldn't ease the ache of loss. Yet deep inside, I felt a lingering sorrow, not a sharp, unbearable pain, but a gentle, persistent ache, like a cold wind that never ceased to blow. I let out a quiet laugh, tinged with bitterness, and whispered to myself, maybe I'm too old to be thinking about all this. But as soon as the words left my lips, another voice arose within me, soft yet resolute. At least I loved, I lived, and I felt. That answer, like a small but steady flame, warmed my heart in that moment. Yes, I had loved, fully and sincerely. I had rediscovered what it felt like to long for someone, to experience joy, and to crave connection, feelings I had thought were lost to me forever. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Would I see Alex again? Would these memories fade with time, or would they remain a part of me forever? But I did know that this pain wouldn't drag me down. Life would go on, like the relentless flow of the rain outside, rushing, constant, and unyielding. And I, though perhaps a bit unsteady, would continue moving forward. Because I knew there were still beautiful things waiting ahead. Outside, the rain kept falling, but somewhere above, the stars seemed to flicker back to life, peeking through the heavy gray clouds. I looked up at the sky, allowing myself a small smile, and closed my eyes. Even without Alex by my side, I would live. Because at the very least, I had loved. In the days after Alex left, my neighborhood seemed to wear a heavy veil of silence. The house across the street, once glowing with warm yellow light every evening, now stood in darkness, its windows shut tight as if trying to erase any trace of his presence. Gone was the sound of Alex's gentle laughter when he stopped by my home, and gone were the long conversations we shared on the porch, where the golden hues of the setting sun would make his face glow brighter. I continued tending to my garden as I always had, but the sense of absence hung over me like an invisible curtain I couldn't brush aside. Each lavender bloom I cared for reminded me of Alex's sincere compliments. I lost count of how many times I unconsciously looked toward his house, hoping for a flicker of light, knowing full well it was futile. One morning, while watering the newly blossomed lavender, my gaze once again drifted toward Alex's house. The front yard was now blanketed with dry leaves, scattered and still, like a quiet reminder of the absolute stillness that had overtaken the place. The windows remained shut. No sign of Alex sitting at his desk, no chance for our eyes to meet through the glass. There was an enormous void in my heart, a heavy feeling I couldn't name. It wasn't just the sorrow of Alex's departure, it was the nagging sense that I had let something slip away, an opportunity, a word left unsaid, or perhaps a step I hadn't been brave enough to take. I wondered, had I done the right thing? Could I have done more? Those questions repeated endlessly in my mind, like echoes in an empty house. But I knew there would be no answers. The silence from the house across the street was the only response, forcing me to learn acceptance. Still, I carried on with my daily routine, nurturing each flower and trimming each bush as if it were my way of holding on to a piece of the peace Alex had brought into my life. In my heart, the memory of him lingered, not as a sharp, unbearable ache, but as a gentle, persistent sorrow, like a melancholy tune that played endlessly in the background. One afternoon, while carefully pruning the blooming roses, I heard the cheerful laughter of children echoing from the community center nearby. Though faint and distant, their laughter felt like a breeze sweeping away the stillness in my thoughts. I paused and stood up, listening intently. Alex's words came rushing back to me, his encouraging smile as he once said, "Rose, you shouldn't keep all this beauty to yourself. You could share it, let others feel it too." I smiled softly, but the smile quickly gave way to a new thought: I can't keep living in this emptiness. The next day, I made a decision. I walked to the community center. Passing through the weathered white gates, I felt a mix of hesitation and a fragile sense of hope. I signed up as a volunteer for their gardening class. For the first time in years, I wasn't alone in my garden. Instead, I shared my love for plants with new faces, from eager children learning to plant their first seeds to elderly folks reminiscing about their own gardening days. At first, I felt clumsy and unsure if I was truly fit for this work. But then, the radiant smile of a little girl as she saw her first flower bloom or the twinkle in an elderly man's eyes as he shared stories about his mother's rose garden made me realize I was doing something meaningful. I began looking forward to every class, every moment of sharing knowledge and seeing joy light up on people's faces. The small hands of a boy gripping a trowel for the first time, or the delighted exclamation of a grandmother when she spotted the first tomato on her plant, each moment felt like a tiny spark, igniting something warm within me. Gradually, I realized that my passion wasn't confined to my backyard garden. It belonged to those who sought peace and joy in simple things. I felt as though I had been given a new life, not just to exist, but to connect and spread beauty to those around me. There were times I stood in the community garden, gazing at the flowers blooming under the sunlight, feeling lighter than I had in a long time. Though Alex was no longer by my side, I held on to the warmth he had brought into my life, the feeling of being alive, of being loved, and of doing something meaningful. And in the laughter of children, the quiet moments beside rows of flowers, I realized that even when we lose something, life always leaves us with opportunities to start anew, in a different way. That afternoon, soft sunlight streamed through the large windows of the community center, casting long, shimmering beams across the classroom floor. The light seemed to breathe life into the room. I stood at the front of the class, showing a small group how to plant seeds. Below me, eager faces focused intently, hands busy with small pots of soil, and bursts of laughter echoed whenever someone accidentally spilled dirt onto the table. Suddenly, a staff member stepped into the room, holding a white envelope. She hesitated before handing it to me, a gentle smile on her face. "It looks like someone sent this just for you." I took the envelope, a mixture of surprise and curiosity welling up as my eyes landed on the familiar handwriting across the front. It was Alex's handwriting. My hands trembled slightly as I opened the envelope, as if my heart already knew this letter held something special. When the words appeared, I read them slowly, savoring each one as it sank deep into my soul. "Thank you for being the light during my darkest days. I've returned to the city, where I've started writing again and am finally finishing the novel I once dreamed of creating. Though we are apart, I often think of you, the one who taught me that life only truly has meaning when we live honestly with our hearts. I hope you find happiness, just as you care for your flowers." I wasn't sure how many times I reread the letter. Each word, each line carried Alex's voice, as if he were standing right here in front of me. My eyes blurred, but not with sadness. These tears weren't from regret, they carried a sense of release, a weight being lifted from my heart. I folded the letter carefully, holding it in my hands, feeling each crease as though I could somehow preserve a bit of Alex's warmth. A profound sense of peace spread through me, like the moment you see the first flower bloom after a long winter. Stepping outside, I let the late afternoon sunlight wrap around me. The garden in front of the community center stretched wide under the setting sun, bathed in hues of gold and orange that painted every branch, every flower, in radiant colors. I stood there, gazing into the distance, allowing my heart to drift with the sunset. Life is a collection of moments, Alex was right. Sometimes, we don't need to hold on to everything forever, we just need to know we've lived fully in those moments. A gentle smile spread across my face, quiet yet profound. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew that today, I was happy. The golden-orange sky burned brightly, and the garden remained vibrant with life. Though Alex was no longer here, a part of him would always stay, with the flowers, the letter, and my heart. In the months that followed, I immersed myself in the rhythm of my new life at the community center. Cool mornings and evenings bathed in the glow of sunsets were spent in the small garden, teaching participants how to nurture plants, sow seeds, and appreciate the beauty of each fragile sprout. Each day, I encountered new faces. Some were young, brimming with eagerness to learn, while others carried with them decades of memories and a deep connection to gardens they had tended in their youth. Every story they shared felt like a seed, planting in me the belief that no matter how hard life gets, there are always beautiful moments to cherish. One afternoon, as I pruned a patch of blooming lavender, an older woman approached me slowly. Her slender frame and neatly pinned silver hair gave her an air of grace, but it was her eyes, gentle and contemplative, that caught my attention. She stood silently for a moment, admiring the pale purple flowers swaying softly in the breeze. Her expression was serene, as though she had found a corner of peace amidst the chaos of life. "Looking at them makes me feel so calm," she said, her voice soft yet full of emotion. She turned to me, her eyes radiating sincerity. "You have a gift, Rose." I paused, looking at her with a gentle smile. "It's not me," I replied, my voice as calm as the air around us. "It's all of us. When we learn to treasure the little things in life, we create our own peace." She nodded, her lips curving into a quiet, knowing smile. We stood there together, surrounded by the sweet scent of lavender and the warm afternoon light, saying nothing more. In that moment, I realized I had rediscovered a part of life I thought I had lost. It wasn't found in grand or distant things, but in the simplest of moments, a flower blooming, a heartfelt thank you, or the radiant look in someone's eyes as they found joy in planting seeds. I gazed at the lavender blooms, my heart filled with gratitude. Alex had once told me I brought peace to those around me, but now I understood that they, too, brought me a peace of their own, a deep, simple, and enduring peace. I bent down again, tending to the flowers, my heart feeling lighter than it had in years. I no longer knew if I would see Alex again someday. The thought of it used to twist my heart, but now it felt like a fleeting breeze, gentle and no longer painful. I had learned to accept. To accept that life doesn't always deliver the perfect endings we hope for, but that doesn't diminish the value of what we've experienced. The losses and wounds I carried had become part of my story, not perfect, but necessary for me to grow and become stronger. Life continues, like a river that never stops flowing. And here I was, in this small, colorful garden, where every flower seemed to hold its own story. Each time I bent down to tend to the blooms, I felt the soft rhythm of my breath, calm and steady. I understood that love doesn't always lead to a perfect conclusion. But in his own way, Alex had become a guiding light. That light didn't illuminate everything, but it was enough to lead me forward, enough to remind me that I deserved to live a meaningful life, regardless of who walked beside me. As I walked through the garden, the late afternoon sun cast its golden glow on each flower. The petals swayed gently in the breeze, as if whispering quiet words of encouragement. And I smiled. Though the past had left its deep imprints on my heart, I was no longer the woman I once was. I had found freedom in letting go, and I knew that whatever lay ahead, I would face it, with strength and hope. Because life, in the end, isn't about the destination. It's about the journey we dare to live, dare to love, and dare to face ourselves.